meeting of the Building and Standards Commission. I want to call this meeting to order. We're actually going to have a staff-led meeting, so we're going to open and close it on staff. And then we'll, at a later meeting, we'll start working towards election of officers and discussions of bylaws at the next meeting that we're looking to schedule in October, so we'll get with each of you. But to start with, we'll want to open the hearing of residents and allow anybody to speak if they want to at this time. So since there's no one to speak, I will introduce our city manager, Dr. Mark Brown.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mark Brown. I'm the city manager. I used to say I'm new, but it's been 8 months now, so I'm not sure I can say that anymore. But it's a privilege to be able to have this commission to get it started. I understand it's been a long journey, several years in the making, so we do appreciate your service, and we thank you for doing that. So I've been a city manager for about 15 years now. Was at the city of Terrell Hills and for about 6 years, and then Alamo Heights for about 7.5 years, so I guess it's 14 years. So I had a lot of background in city government, and then I was in the Air Force for almost 27 years before that. So that's basically been my background. If I can help you or answer questions or in any way assist you, I would certainly be happy to do that. Look forward to working with you and seeing what this commission can accomplish. And so just let me introduce my assistant city managers. First we have Brian James, and Brian's been with the city about 7 years now, and you all know Brian, I'm sure, and does a great job for us and handles more of the planning side of our city government. And then Charles Kelm, there he is, our other assistant city manager, and he handles public safety and public works, that side of our organization. So we're sort of make up the city manager's office along with Sarah Gonzalez, who's the assistant to the city manager. So we're the leadership, we're the ones responsible, so please let us know how we can help you. And I don't know if Brian, if you want to say anything, or all good? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. So as well as introduction by the city manager, we'd like for each of you to introduce yourselves and maybe tell us a little bit about why you're on this board maybe, or just anything you'd like to share with us. I'll let you start over here.
I'm Captain Frenchy Bourgeois. I am currently a pilot, instructor pilot of the OGV. So I currently give all the pilots on base a check ride, and I'm the chief who does that. Currently, let's see, my background, let me see, I'm from Rochester, New York. I moved here about 1.5 years ago. I got a bachelor's degree in public policy, got my master's degree in science and technology politics, got my associate's degree in physics. I'm a graduate of Squadron Officer School, and now I'm getting my second master's degree currently in Airman Leadership course. From there, I got on this board. I'm also on the Historical Preservation Committee as well, and my area expertise is really in transportation and physics and the like, and they thought that building materials and structures and how all those work together, my physics background might be a good pick for that.
Awesome, thank you. Yes.
My name is Bruce Johnson. I'm a building superintendent. I build homes for a living. I work for a company right now building townhomes downtown. Been building for the most recent stint, about 15 years, for 4 different builders and 1 building supplier. So I've got a lot of experience in how things go together and how they're supposed to look when they're done, and trying to follow codes and keep those guys in the back happy, that kind of thing. I'm also a pilot, but not of things quite as powerful as what he does, little planes. That's about all I have.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Matthew Wood. I'm the token enlisted Navy guy and Marine officer, but I'm a consultant for the Air Force, so I've got that little bit of affiliation there. Just live locally, wife, couple kids, settled in Texas, and just wanted to get involved. Just like that.
Thank you.
My name is Glenn Outlaw, although I think most everybody out there knows who I am. But for the rest of the board, I'm retired Air Force, moved here in 1989, stationed out at Randolph. retired in 92 and went to work for the city of Schertz, first as a fire inspector and then later as their fire marshal. Spent almost 20 years doing plan review and fire code and building code enforcement. And I'm on this board, again, the city needed a little help in getting this thing started, and so I'm more than happy to fill in and help out the city. Look forward to getting to know the rest of you a little bit better and working with you. Thanks.
Evening, my name is Sean Moore. Recently just retired from the United States Air Force, assigned the last 16 years to recruiting. I have a master's degree in public administration, government and policy, public policy writing. Just recently moved to Schertz like 2 years ago. My wife is a gastrointestinal doctor, and loved the area, decided to stay here. I actually volunteered for a number of boards and was selected for this one along with Parks and Rec, and looking forward to working with everybody and making Schertz a better place.
Well, congratulations and welcome to the board, and thank you so much for sharing with us. We are going to move into staff introductions as each department is going to come up and give you a small piece of information, and at that time, each of us will introduce ourselves. So we're not just all doing it at one time. So I'm Lisa Wood. I'm the Director of Planning and Community Development, and I oversee the Building Inspections Department and the Planning and Zoning Department. I want to introduce a couple of staff members to start with. We have Tiffany Danhoff over here. She's going to be your recording secretary, and she works as the Executive Administrative Assistant for Planning and Community Development. And then over here we have Ashley Deasy. She is our Development Specialist, and she works in the department and will help out administratively if the board needs anything. So if you have any questions or you need any information, contact one of these two ladies, and they'll help you through getting the information that you need. I'm also now going to introduce Emily Delgado and just tell you a little bit about our journey here, as Dr. Brown mentioned. Ooh, it's got a nice little noise. So we started working on this probably back in 2016, 2017, by the recommendation of our city attorney at the time that we needed probably a Board of Appeals instead of taking everything to our Zoning Board of Adjustment. And so we started working through that and created a board that was adopted by council in February of 2018. And from then to today, we've been working to try to get a full commission. And now that since we've been able to do that, it's been a while, but we have been able to do it, and that's nice. We actually have 5 members and 2 alternates, so when somebody can't, show up or unable to attend, we actually have somebody to step in the role and fill those voids. The commission was intended to provide the appropriate outlet for applicants requesting an appeal to the decision of the fire marshal or building official, and then review and take appropriate actions on violations of our public nuisance ordinance when it comes to buildings and structures. Additionally, and I believe some vegetation issues as well. Additionally, the Building and Standards Commission will act as an advisor to the building official and the fire chief, including making recommendations to City Council regarding proposed building code and fire code amendments. And that's some of the first things that you will actually hear to start with. As I mentioned before, we'll try to schedule a meeting in October to bring y'all all back together to talk about bylaws and how the meetings are going to run, and then also the election of officers. So the idea of introducing yourself here to maybe get a little bit friendly, so it's kind of hard to select a chair and vice chair if you don't really know anybody. So that will be the first thing that we'll go through. I'm going to turn it over to Emily Delgado now. She is one of the planners in our office, and she will go through the duties of the Building and Standards Commission.
Good evening, Commissioners. So like Lisa said, she gave you a kind of a brief overview of what the commission was designed for, and I'm going to kind of expand upon that. And I know it's a lot of words on the slide. I'm sorry. I think y'all have all seen the adoption ordinance, and it's going to be a lot of the same thing. So sorry if it's a little repetitive. So the commission hears cases relative to ordinance violations, specifically relating to public safety, for materials or methods used for construction, fire safety, damaged or deteriorated buildings, refuse, vegetation, any of those nuisance problems, such like insects or rodents, and then also building code and fire code amendments or adoptions of new issues. You guys also have the authority to order the repair of buildings found to be in violation. So if a residential structure is brought to you guys found to be in violation, you guys can actually order the upkeep and the reconstruction of that building, if you will. Another item that you guys have the authority to hear is appeals to a decision from the fire chief, fire marshal, or the building official, so our chief building official, which will meet here in the next workshop. Specifically related to alternate materials and construction methods, or interpreting a fire code or a building code. Say Gil or Tommy, our building official, and fire marshal make a decision, and the applicant doesn't agree with that, they can appeal that to you guys, and then you all would make the decision whether that appeal should be overturned and sided with the applicant. Very similar, you have the authority to hear alternative construction material. So if there's something in the a building material, let's say a new material, it's not been evaluated through the building code yet, and somebody wants to use that, but we can't approve it because it's not been authorized by the building code, we can bring that material to you all and evaluate its appropriateness for stability and strength, and see if we should allow that to be used. We can bring some of those cases to you guys. Same thing on the fire side. If there's some new fire retardant paint or something like that, we can bring that to you. You also have the responsibilities of hearing the proposed amendments like we had talked about. Lisa had mentioned before, that's going to be one of the first cases that we bring forward is the adoption of the new building code and fire codes. Also to act as an advisor to the fire chief and building official. So if there's something that they're weighing on, they'll come to you guys for your expertise and kind of a sounding board on decisions potentially. So the next item is going through the actual case types. So I touched briefly on what your authorities and abilities are, but these will be more specific examples based on the code official that would actually be bringing that item to you. So the first one is going to be building. So I want to introduce Gil Durant, our chief building official.
Hello, my name is Gil Durant. I'm the chief building official, and this is Armando Acala. Sorry. And he's one of my new inspectors. What we've probably will be bringing to y'all, of course, will be the International Building Code and Adoptions and Amendments for consideration. Requests for review of alternate building materials when I have an applicant come in with a material that's not currently approved by the National Model Code. And then we'll be looking for appeals to decisions by myself brought by an applicant that would like to request the commission overturn a decision made by myself. Next that I've got is just an example of one of the items that you'll all be seeing here shortly. It's the new International Residential Code, well, a proposed ordinance change, which is going to be to the plumbing code for trenching and bedding. No sewer drain waste vent shall occur until the perimeter of the foundation boards are installed and the compacted fill is placed within the structure. Trenching or bedding of the piping will use the compacted materials for assuring the slope of the piping is correct for the sewer drainage and that it's maintained. And the reason I am bringing this is the previous slide reflects a request by local plumbers to require home builders to place compacted material in the building batter boards prior to the placement of the drain waste vent piping. This will reduce damage to the piping by heavy equipment running over the piping, which will change the fall of the pipe and damage due to impacts that could result in either fractures within the pipe or bending or collapsing of the pipe. Next will be the fire department and some related cases.
Good evening. I just wanted to come introduce myself. I'm Cade Long, the fire chief here. We look forward to working with each of you and bringing the new code amendments forward and discussing those with you. You're coming up soon. And I'll introduce our fire marshal is Thomas Pender, and he's going to go through the slides.
Good evening, everyone. So the international code is what we're currently under, the 2012. Some of the stuff we're going to be bringing to you hopefully soon will be the 2008 fire code with some amendments that come to it. I have in this slide presentation a couple of them of things that we won't bring to you because it's going to be a good change and it's something y'all may see. So this one, in that new 18 code, is a requirement for any A2 occupancy, which is an assembly. It has an occupancy load of 300 or more to be sprinkled no matter what. Currently, we only have one business in the city that gets close to this. That may be something they want to try to change. This is because of the, as you see the pictures there, the station fire that killed several people in 2003. This would be something that someone would try to argue on us with. And then this is one that we currently have had to make changes on previous buildings in the city. It's a factory one or a storage one, increasing the distance for travel if it's in a sprinkled building. Most of the buildings are 30 plus feet. So smoke's not going to bank too low, therefore we can give them longer travel distances up to 400 feet. With the old code, with the 12 code, it didn't allow this, but due to previous fire marshals in the city have let this occur, not anything bad, but because they had studies given to them saying that with the smoke rise, with the travel distance being sprinkled, it was a good thing. So that's one of the new items in 2012, or 2018, excuse me. And I'll code enforcement.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Corporal Ernest Spradling. I'm a supervisor with the Code Enforcement Division. We also have back in the back our lieutenant, who's the lieutenant over the Marshals Division, which is our Code Enforcement, the Sanitarian, as well as our Warrants Division, Lieutenant Pulaski. And back there also is our Chief of Police, Chief Hansen. And I'm going to introduce here, this is our most seasoned, been here a long time doing code enforcement for the city. Officer Brooks here is going to explain everything to you. Thank you.
Good evening. So I'm going to go ahead and go over some of our current procedures that might get us to where y'all are at. So our current procedure is a complaint is received by the department. An example given would be high grass, inoperable motor vehicles, substandard structures. So an officer is dispatched to the location to first of all verify that there's actually a violation present. The officer makes a determination if the violation exists. When determined violation exists, the officer will attempt to make contact with the responsible party. Once the responsible party is contacted, they are advised of the violation and a request is made for voluntary compliance. I think it's important to note that over 90% of all of our complaints in the city of Schertz are done by voluntary compliance. Our citizens are very receptive to any request that we make. When a responsible party, for some reason, is not responsive, we issue a citation requiring them to appear in municipal court. At that time, 99% of all of our complaints are remedied. When all other attempts fail to remedy the violation, depending on the violation, we may submit a complaint to the Building Standards Commission and show up here. Once a complaint for an unsafe structure is received, an officer will be dispatched to investigate the complaint. The officer will immediately begin enforcement action on any nuisance observed. An example given would be unsanitary conditions, vermin, rat infested, contains filth or other contamination, which causes the structure to be deemed unsafe. In the event an officer suspects the structural integrity may be an issue, we may contact the building inspector or chief building inspector to perform an inspection. And in the case that a fire was involved, we may contact the fire marshal for an inspection at that time. Once a nuisance is observed on the property, the decision will be made by the responding officer whether the case will be submitted and determined, submit for a hearing. Basically, if we find out something needs to go to y'all and we can't handle it in any other venue, then we would come and use this commission. Y'all have-
Okay, so that was a brief overview, quick overview. I know that we sent you the ordinances. We also are going to have the city attorney provide you some training on open meetings and the public information. Yep. Is there any questions for us right now for anybody that's here? Or would y'all like to kind of mull over everything and send questions to either me or Tiffany Danhoff? I believe she sent the open. Anything that y'all would like to discuss at the next meeting? We're looking at holding a meeting in October to, as I mentioned, elect officers, discuss the bylaws, and anything else you would like to discuss. And the plan is to bring building code and fire code amendments probably end of 2018, early 2019. Question? No? Is that? Okay, I'm going to introduce Dan Santee then. Pull up your slide. Yep. Okay.
Let's do open meetings first. And you'll come back when I have to switch it. I'm just kidding. Good afternoon, good evening, whatever it is at this point. Dan Santee, I'm with Denton DeMar, Roach, Bernal, and Zek. We are the city attorneys for the city of Schertz, and they asked me to come and do this auxiliary. You're going to be so excited to hear this information. I know you are. But I have some good news and bad news. There's 60 slides. I'm not going to do them all, so I know you're disappointed to hear that. That's both good and bad because you're going to have to go online and complete this training. You have 90 days from the time you're appointed, or we'll give you 90 days from this first meeting in order to complete the training and provide evidence of your completion to the city secretary to keep that on file. And that's not our rule, that's the state's rule. This is kind of what you can expect, though. It's even worse online, believe it or not. All I'm going to do tonight, though, is hit the highlights to kind of whet your appetite so you'll be so excited you're going to run home, you're going to log right on, and you're going to start this training. So welcome to the world of public service. You are now going to have to abide by the Open Meetings Act and Public Information Act. Oh gosh, which one, Emily? There we go. Okay, so I'm going to blow through this pretty fast, though, because a lot of this information, understand that the training you're going to see online is not geared to you as board members specifically. So it's geared towards city secretaries, elected officials. It's very broad, and it goes in depth in both the Open Meetings Act and the Public Information Act. So what I want to focus on tonight is I just want to hit really the elements within those acts that tend to give people the most trouble who casually serve on boards. And I'm glad to hear. I mean, I know Mr. Outlaw knows this. He's heard this before. He was probably really dreading the fact that it was on the agenda again. And if you're already serving on the parks, you've probably been through this training, or you should have completed this training online already. So if you didn't, don't speak, because they're making a recording of this, and you don't want to be on the record having said that you did if you didn't. So we're not going to. Like I said, I'm going to skip through this pretty good. So what is a quorum? So, that's the big thing, right? So anything dealing with Open Meetings Act is going to be predicated on whether or not a quorum of the body is present. And so often we assume that they're often talking about a posted meeting, right? But it doesn't have to just be a posted meeting, and we'll get into that further as we go through this. But understand too that when you do your bylaws, they're gonna tell you what constitutes a quorum for this body, and I think is it 4? Okay, we've settled on 4 for your body. So anytime there's 4 of you present, whether it's here or elsewhere, there's the potential that it could be considered a quorum. It doesn't mean that you're doing business or engaging in business or deliberation or anything such as that. But if there's 4 of you present, whether it's at this meeting or at a city council meeting or anything else such as that, that would constitute a quorum. It's just whether or not it's going to meet the definition of anything that is problematic under the Act. And that's when we get into what constitutes a meeting, right? So having a quorum present is one thing. Does it constitute a meeting, though? Because there's more than just that one element. A meeting occurs when a quorum's present and the public business that you are charged with is actually discussed. So, for example, if you're at the Christmas tree lighting ceremony in Schertz, and all of you happen to be there, well, you're not there for the purpose of discussing someone's dilapidated built a structure down the block, but we also don't want you to do that because that's not why you're there, right? You're there for the cocoa and the tree lighting and the carols. So we don't want you engaging in that other conduct. Because that's where then we would hit all three of our elements, right? A quorum's present, and the public business that you're charged with is actually discussed. And a member of the governmental body participates in that discussion. So if someone comes up sees a group of you and says, hey, I want to talk to you about such and such, it doesn't have to just be you talking to each other. It can be a member of the public even coming up saying, hey, this is a good opportunity. I'm going to have a case come in front of you all in a couple of months. I just kind of want to plant some seeds for you, pick your brain a little bit. You should be wary of those kind of things. Definition 2 broadens it even further. So if members receive information from, give information to, ask questions of, or receive questions from any third persons. And where these things always get tricky, and I have this come up, here's a real life circumstance. I got a phone call. I was in Coleman, Texas. Do y'all know where Coleman, Texas is? I was in Coleman, Texas with the city manager. It's all the way up near Abilene. I get a call all the way from a city down in the valley, right? And that's kind of how far apart our clients stretch. And they wanted to know, hey, we were supposed to have a meeting today. We didn't have a quorum show up, but they're going to go ahead and we're going to hear everything because these people came out. But we know we can't take action. Is that a problem? And I'm like covering up the phone as I curse, and then I get back on the phone. I was like, hey, let's not do that. Can we not do that? And the reason why that, if you're like, well, but there's not a quorum present, but that's problematic because even when you meet in numbers less than a quorum, if that other person is briefed on that later and then that information is going to come back to that same board, you run the risk of having a walking quorum allegation raised against you. And that can be problematic for any action that's ultimately taken on those. We don't want those things to be voided or voidable at a later date because we engaged in something that could constitute a walking quorum. Does not apply to social functions or like TML workshops and training sessions. We host an event every year called Hog Wild, where we invite everybody who's appointed to the boards and commissions of places we represent to come, and it's just like going to a TML thing or anything such as that. It's educational in nature, or like your social functions. I'm not going to talk about online message boards because Schertz does not have an online message board. So there are notice requirements. One of the things that I would encourage you to do as a board member is read your agendas when they send those to you. Read the agenda and the packet when it is sent to you and emailed to you. The staff works really hard on those. And the reason why I say that, because if you ever look at an agenda and you don't know what you're going to be doing or talking about when you get there, you need to let the staff know, hey, give them a heads up. Hey, I don't think this was adequate. I don't think this was giving us enough notice. Now, if I see it ahead of time, and we have this discussion, I work with the staff all the time to make sure that our posted notice has enough specificity that the public knows. The whole idea of having that agenda and those notice requirements is transparency for the public so that they can read that and decide whether or not they want to attend your meetings. You would not do this, and I know you would not do this, but believe it or not, there are boards and commissions and even city councils in other areas, not here necessarily, that will be purposely vague on agenda postings because maybe they don't want everybody coming out. And that is really discouraged. It has to be adequate notice for you to take action, and we don't want that being challenged. And we don't like general headings and things such as that. So that's just something, that's how you can help us be better, is because you're the subject matter expert. So if you don't know what we're going to be talking about, we need to do a better job of being more descriptive in those items. So individual notice is not required unless the statute requires individual notice. And when it does, the staff takes care of that. They mail those out individually. Schertz does have to post all of theirs on the internet. There are provisions for emergency meetings. I can't imagine, well, there could be circumstances where you might be called on less than 72 hours. Very rare. We try not to do those at all, unless there's an immediate concern. When the hurricane hit a couple of years ago, I had many client cities down along the coast that had to post emergency meetings. So much so that even the legislature, despite how they normally are, were very helpful this session in making accommodations for disasters and things such as that when we need to post and we have short notice, because typically it allows on 2 hours. You can meet on 2 hours notice if you really must, but they broaden that definition to give more flexibilities to cities when there are actual emergencies and a need to do that. Okay. I'm just skipping ahead here. Obviously, we can't convene a meeting unless there's a quorum present. Now, one of the things that you may not be aware of is that members of the public do have a right to record meetings. And I've been in meetings before where a board chair or somebody's had to try to keep somebody from recording with their phone or things such as that. We can't do that. They're allowed to do that. The city can adopt rules that say where they have to be so they don't disrupt the meeting. But anybody present at a public meeting is able to record that. I'm surprised that, quite honestly, I'm not a Facebook star yet, because I get Facebook live streamed almost every meeting I go to by somebody that's in the crowd in some of these smaller towns. You know, that's how they do it. They don't have the news media, and they don't have cameras set up. They're all holding up their phones, and they're like live streaming it. So new legislation passed, I'll talk about in a second, where members of the public have a right to, believe it or not, there are cities who don't have citizen comment. I represented a city for 18 years in-house that did not have citizen comment on their agendas. They didn't really want to, I mean, they had meetings during the day and they didn't have citizen comment. If they had a public hearing, you could speak, but otherwise they didn't really want to hear from their citizens. Down here, that's typically not an issue. Most of the cities down in the San Antonio and Austin region, they already have citizen comments, which is great. I think that's a very good thing. You can adopt provisions that govern how long people can speak. You'll do that when you do your bylaws, and you'll probably follow whatever the city guidelines are for how long you allow people to speak. But the board chair, whoever you select from among you, always has discretion as well to allow for a little bit more time. And I can see that happening with this board, right? Because if I'm here because I might need to tear down a structure, or the city's telling me to tear down a structure, and maybe it's been in my family a long time. I mean, there can be, I could see where this board here could deal with some issues where you could have long public hearings. My non-legal advice to you is let them speak as long as they need to speak on an issue of that magnitude, because they're either going to do it here or they're going to do it somewhere else. They need to plead their case. You can never, as an attorney, I never feel like I can have too much record, right? As much as somebody wants to provide on the record, we want to capture that, let them say what they have to say, whatever that might be. So after September 1st, no city will have an option. They'll have to allow for citizen comments, either at the beginning or on individual items. Closed sessions, so you will, because you do have some final rulemaking authority, final authority, some quasi-judicial authority, you do have the right to have a closed session. Most often, that's going to be consultation with attorney. I don't believe I'm going to be at your meetings unless the staff tells me when I'm needed at a meeting, based on what they know of the cases. But there could be occasions when you will have me, or Matthew's one of our attorneys as well. One of our attorneys would be here and might convene in closed session to give you legal advice as to, hey, here's what's about to happen out there. Here are the options. Here's what could happen, and here's what you can do about it. It's up to you who attends closed sessions. I would just say that you might want someone. Let's say we are dealing with something in closed session. We might want our code enforcement officer to join us in there to give some information if need be, but we don't have the other party join. We never have the owner of a property or somebody who's adverse to the city join us in closed session, because we waive our privileges if we were to do that. Their interests are not aligned with ours. These are just the reasons why you can. Like I said, for you, it's most likely going to be consultation with attorney. There are, if for some reason there's a violation, just know there are civil and criminal penalties for violations of the Open Meetings Act. And I would say that if you don't believe that these things ever happen, I have personally prosecuted violations of the Open Meetings Act. My first job out of law school was as a prosecutor in East Texas, and I did actually prosecute violations of the Open Meetings Act. So they do happen. It falls to the county attorney or district attorney as to for that prosecution. Now, since that time, since switching from prosecution to municipal law, I've not had a client prosecuted under the Open Meetings Act or Public Information Act, but it can happen. Any action taken in violation of the act is voidable. So it's not really in our interest to take any action if we believe there's a possibility that the Open Meetings Act could be violated when we do that, because it can be set aside and then we're back to square one anyway. Any interested person can bring a lawsuit to enjoin anything. So let's say, for example, the order from this commission was that a structure be torn down, but in doing so, we somehow got there in violation of the Open Meetings Act. Let's say y'all talked at that nice new Starbucks on 3009 before coming over here, or a couple of you did, and then two more of y'all did that some other time, but somebody knew this in Schertz, because it's kind of a small town. So let's say that happened, and then you put this order out there that this structure has to be torn down. Somebody could file a civil lawsuit, get an injunction to prevent that from happening, and bring suit against the commission for violation of the Open Meetings Act. That's kind of how those things happen in real life, is that someone knows. Remember, because if two people know, right, there's no secrets. As long as two people know, then the whole world is going to know at some point in time. So it does happen. Also, if you participate in a closed meeting knowing that it's not properly posted or convened, that's a violation. Remember, too, though, that violation of the Open Meetings Act, this is an important thing here, there have to be knowing violations. So if a prosecutor is going to bring any kind of action, or if somebody's going to file a suit to set aside something, they have to show that you knowingly conspired to circumvent the Open Meetings Act, that you didn't just accidentally have someone meet in numbers less than a quorum, right? Now, one of the things that you will deal with, you will undoubtedly deal with this, because I've seen it for 20 years now, is people who have an item coming before, not just this commission, but planning and zoning, historic preservation, parks and they coming before city council, any board like that. So they want to know that they have a shot, right? They want to know that their item is going to get full consideration. And they are notorious for polling commission members or council members ahead of the meeting, or their attorney, or their representative, or their agent. They're going to reach out to you and say, I just want to introduce myself. I represent so-and-so. They have a case coming before your board or your commission in a few weeks. I just want to make sure that you have all the facts you need. And can I count on you? Can I count on your support? That's how they like to end those things. I'm not telling you not to take those calls. I think a great standard response, because, you're serving the public now, so you can't avoid that. You can't avoid those calls. But my favorite response is simply, hey, appreciate your call. Look, I'm going to wait until the meeting to hear this information and deliberate with the rest of the commission and have my decision made there. Because that can't be misunderstood, right? So just be careful about that. Sometimes people can be pretty aggressive depending on the type of case, and that's just good advice. The deliberation should take place here in an open meeting that's posted, that everybody's at. Okay, so legislative changes this time. It used to be that deliberation only meant verbal. It now includes written exchanges. And that's a huge change that I'm not hearing a lot of conversation about, because we all understand verbal, right? And it's easy, I didn't call him, I didn't talk to him. But written, now we're into text messages, emails, and things such as that can constitute deliberation between a quorum of the body. So be very mindful of that. They keep adding things to these acts, and that's one that's problematic. So verbal or written exchange between a quorum of a governmental body or between a quorum of a governmental body and another person concerning an issue within the jurisdiction of the governmental body. So where it says or written and another person, that doesn't mean y'all necessarily communicating with each other. It could be Brian, you gotta watch this one. So it could be Brian James back here communicating with all y'all via a written communication that could constitute deliberation. You got to be very mindful of that. No reply to all. If they BCC you, I mean, don't go including other commissioners and things such as that on your written communication. Also, be mindful of social media has become a new battlefield for these kind of things. So be careful getting on the all popular Church-Cibolo area message boards and chiming in about whatever it is you work on. The other thing, a prohibited series of communications. A member of a governmental body commits an offense if the member knowingly engages in at least one communication among a series of communications that each occur outside of a meeting authorized by this chapter and that concern an issue within the jurisdiction. That's a lot of words. Know this whole legislative change was because the Texas Open Meetings Act was ruled unconstitutional while the legislature was in session. So they scrambled to cobble together something to close the loophole, and in my estimation, failed miserably, however, exposed you to new dangers that were probably unintended by their inartful attempts at trying to close the loophole. I still don't think they accomplished it, but they just managed to muddy it even more by adding written communication. It still have to have known at the time that it would involved or would involve a quorum and would constitute deliberation, which is awful damn hard to do if it's just one communication in something that becomes a series of communications, but that won't matter if someone decides that's what has happened. Okay, so you will have to go on this OAG website in order to do the actual training. And if you've already done this, give a copy of your completed certificate for this board to Emily or to the city secretary. For the rest of you, you need to have completed it before you have your next meeting in October. Would be great if you could have done that. Okay. Where's the next one, Em? I don't want to break anything. That usually happens. Y'all are doing great. Nobody's asleep yet. Well, I know. Well, y'all, that's okay. That's okay. This is the group that matters up here. Okay, so what is public information? Make this short and sweet. It's everything. Everything. If it touches and concerns a unit of government, it's public information in whatever form it's kept. It means information that is written, produced, collected, assembled, or maintained under a law or ordinance in connection with the transaction of official business. So I guess that's the one thing I would keep in mind. So it's public information is anything regarding the official business of the city of Schertz. And so now your dealings on this board constitute public information when it's written, when any information that you're exchanging with staff, with each other, with the public, if it deals with your job that you're doing as a commissioner, is public information. Now, why is that a matter? Because it's every form. Paper, microfilm, video, emails, text message, audio tapes, computer data, social media posts, that is all public information. If you as a commissioner are sending that information, creating that information, keeping that information as a commissioner. It doesn't matter if it's on your personal email. It doesn't matter if it's on your personal cell phone, in your personal text messages. None of that means anything. It's what is the information. So if it's information about your role as a commissioner, it's public information. And when we get a request for this, we process a lot of public information requests for Schertz and other cities. On more than one occasion, I've had to go through literally 1,500 emails because of requests that came in for a council member or a P&Z commissioner or somebody's personal emails or any emails. They don't say personal, they just say any emails. And we have to tell them, look, personal emails too. If it's on a personal account or a city account, a lot of cities, they don't even make that distinction. I don't know, will they have a Shirts account here, or do they all coming in? So have fun. It's all coming to your personal emails. What I would suggest then, since they don't give you all a Shirts email account, when you get any correspondence or anything, just in Outlook, just create a little folder to the side, okay? And when those emails come in and you've read them, save them in that folder, and you can set when those things roll off based on the Records Retention Act, because you have to save those. If it's public information, you have an obligation as a commissioner to preserve that information until the Records Retention Act says you can destroy that information. Okay, so just be mindful of those things. The city secretary can give you a copy of that schedule if you need that, but be mindful of that, because what I have seen happen numerous times is I get a Public Information Act request for all the correspondence, for all the commissioners or council members on a particular item, and I get information from some of them, and then others say, I don't have anything. And I'm like, yeah, you probably had, you probably actually did, because your name's on all these emails, and you're telling me you don't have any of these records, and we have an issue. We have an issue because we've had public information that is no longer available because you've deleted it or you've done something with it. So understand, emails, text messages, that's a big deal. And it doesn't matter where it's located. And it doesn't matter if it's with your third-party provider of your service. Okay, we already established that you're subject to it. Judicial branch, they have their own Records Act. Y'all don't have to be mindful of that. So here's the thing. So a request must be in writing. Verbal request by phone or in person does not trigger any kind of Public Information Act response. And the information must be in existence. So, and understand too, though, that someone might approach you individually. They might come to you and say, or email you and say, I want a copy of these things. If that ever happens, please don't ignore it. Please don't ignore it. Now, I think we've designated here, the city secretary is designated. So if a city has designated the city secretary as the custodian and the person who gets these requests, technically we don't have to respond, but I know that Shirts is all about customer service as well. So if you do get a request, forward it to Brenda Dennis over at the city secretary's office, and she'll deal with it. You don't have to deal with it, but we don't want it sitting out there and there to be any confusion that somebody asked for something and we just ignored it or didn't respond to it. So the easiest thing to do, would you concur, Brian? Go ahead and send that over to Brenda. Yeah, I think that's best. Okay. And also, there's no magic words. I had one of my favorite stories was I'm sitting at a council meeting, and a city council member, they're passing notes back and forth. And really, you should be careful doing that, because here's what happens. During the meeting, as soon as there was a break, I had a reporter, those still existed, a reporter gets up. She had handwritten out an open records request on a piece of paper and handed it to me, and it said, I want all the notes being passed back and forth by the city council members. I was like, damn it. I was like, I didn't see the notes. They weren't passing them to the attorney, so I had no idea it was on those notes. So I'm like, well, this could be really bad or really entertaining. So during the break, I went to the council members. I was like, I need all the notes y'all are passing back and forth, please, before you leave today. Now, I had 10 days to comply, technically. But the problem is the act doesn't literally say I have 10 days. It says as soon as possible. But I have up to 10 days before I have to get the AG involved. And so I gathered up all the notes, and I looked at them, and it was, thankfully, it was, where do you want to eat after this? Oh, this is taking too long. And I mean, it was that kind of, it had nothing to do with any of the business. So right then and there, I made copies of each of them, and I handed them to her, and she was rather disappointed. I was rather relieved. But just know that, yeah, we don't want to pass notes back and forth. And also, just for the record, just be careful on any sidebar conversations, because if the mics don't pick it up, it never happened. So when people are standing here or they're in the audience, and this is more of an open meetings thing, and they see y'all leaning your heads together and talking, and it's whoever's, I mean, over, she doesn't know what y'all are saying. We need a record of whatever that is, because it might be really important for me to defend your actions when you do something and nobody knows why, and we have to go to court. So make sure that all your comments when you're sitting up here are captured on the microphone, and everybody that else is up there is able to hear those things. So, yeah, it can be very informal, typed or handwritten. It doesn't have to cite the law. It just says has to seek public information when it's handed in. They can request copies, or they can request to inspect on site. Governmental bodies have to display a sign. The city of Schertz has done that. We can't ask them why they want it. Be helpful if we could. We can't ask them why they want it. They don't have to tell us, and we can't ask why. And the rest of that's just stuff for my city secretary to be aware of. So we have to promptly produce it. So what happens when this comes in is that if it's not real clear, if they say, I want everything that Matthew Wood has emailed or received over the last 5 years, well, that's pretty excessive. Can you be more specific? I mean, we have a right to request clarification. We don't get to ask them why they want all Matthew Wood's emails, but we can say, can you narrow the scope of your request? 5 years, he wasn't even on. He wasn't even a commissioner on this board 5 years ago. He has served for X amount of time. Do you just want emails during that period of time? Do you want emails for long? I mean, so we can do those kind of things. We can ask them if it's about a particular property or case, but we can't ask why they want it. We also have to treat all requests uniformly. The one thing that we can't do is selective disclosure, right? If I'm going to give, once information, and this happens a lot, so once information is disclosed to a member of the public, I don't have the right at that point to ask to withhold it. So if we like this one requester and we give them the information, then somebody else asks for the same information, if I shouldn't have given it to this person, I'm hosed because I've got to give it to them and the paper and everybody else that wants it at that point. I've waived any ability to withhold it. Let's see. Okay, I'm just going to scan through here. Generally, what we do is when it comes in, we look at it, or the city secretary does. Schertz is pretty good about handling their own requests. If they need our assistance, they ask us. And within that 10-day period, though, I have to make a decision. I have to decide, hey, does any of this, it's all public information, there's no doubt, but there's about 150 exceptions to disclosure. And which means that even though it's public information, the interest of the public is outweighed by some other factor. And it could be because it's personal information, or it could be because it's privileged information, or it could be because it's a subject of litigation, or attorney-client privilege, any number of things. So when someone asks for information, we gather all the information. We don't get to make that decision ourselves. We go through all the information. We flag the information that we believe should be withheld, and then we have to send it to the Attorney General and make an argument as to why the information we've flagged or marked should be redacted or withheld completely. So that's kind of how the Information Act works. There's a 10-day deadline and a 15-day deadline. We shoot for having everything out by the 10 days, even though we're not required to have it all out to the 15th. And that's more information than you need, but if you've ever wondered how that actually works, that's how it actually works. Request comes in, you got to gather the information. A lot of cities misread that. They think that, oh, well, they're asking for law enforcement records. I don't have to release that. No, you don't get to make that decision. The Attorney General has very clearly told us. When Dan Morales was Attorney General, that's how it worked. If they'd ever ruled on anything that you could argue, then you just did it yourself. Nobody sent it to the Attorney General. And, well, I shouldn't say nobody. The volume of requests have gone up exponentially because starting with John Cornyn and then continuing with Greg Abbott and then the current AG, who I'm not even going to mention his name, but they have decided that, yeah, no, y'all don't get to, unless we have ruled on that specific information, you don't get to make those kind of decisions. You have to send it to us, and my minion of attorney, all my minions, all my attorneys will look at that information and they'll make a decision. And they have 45 to 60 days to issue a ruling on your request to withhold information. Skipping through this, you'll get all of this online. Believe me. It's presumed public if we don't do that, right? So if we take too long in going through the information and deciding, and I wish it didn't happen, but I literally get information on the 10th day from cities on occasion saying we think we should probably not release this. I'm like, thanks, great. Today's the deadline. And so we send off what's called a 10-day brief, where we literally claim every exception. We send that to the AG with a promise to supplement before the 15th day, which is allowed by law. Not proud of that, but that's what we do. and if we have to, because sometimes those requests come in at the deadline, and it's 10 business days, by the way. Okay, and then there's a 15 business day deadline. These are just examples. I'm not going to go through this. There same penalties as you heard on the open meetings. There's also injunctive relief, same as we've already said. And I have had, actually, within the last 3-4 years, dealt with 3 different Public Information Act lawsuits. So those are more common than anything under open meetings. So those happen much more often. Actually, we've dealt with more than that. I've personally been involved with that many, but our firm has probably handled 6 Public Information Act lawsuits where there was not timely compliance or not all the information was released. And this is great, because if you want to challenge a ruling, you got to sue them in their backyard. You got to go over to Travis County. They get a home field advantage. We can't sue them over here. Okay, criminal penalty. Legislative changes, just run through these real quick. They've changed the definition of protected health information, added a definition for temporary custodian. And that's kind of interesting, because a lot of times, and I know our city's no different here, we have a lot of people, we have a lot of consultants that we work with in Schertz, independent parties, and they hold public information on behalf, while they're our consultant on whatever the case may be, that's still public information, even if it's in their possession. Information that I have in my possession as city attorney for the city of Schertz is still public information. And so they've added some definitions to clear that up, because what happens when that third-party consultant says, no, I'm not going to give you the information that you're wanting, and we're telling them, look, we have to have this back to comply with this Public Information Act request. So the legislature added a lot of information on that. Also, former public officers' employees. What happens when an employee leaves and decides, you know what, I'm just gonna take all this with me. I'm not leaving anything in my desk, because there might be stuff here that I don't want to leave in my desk, and they take that information and they go. Well, they have an affirmative duty to comply with any request for public information. Also, the Records Retention Act, I've already said, there's a good reference in there for that. And you have no personal or property right in public information. That's important too, because even you as commissioners, if it's on your personal devices, on your personal email, it is not your property. You have no right to that property. It's the public's property. There are specific penalties if a temporary custodian fails to comply, and that is a blow through the Public Information Act. Again, you'll have to complete the training. It's not entertaining at all, but you will have to complete it and show proof of completion. That was really high-level overview. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those. If you no longer want to serve because of this, then you just need to see Emily, and they'll get back to work at finding someone else. So, any questions? All right. Thank you.
I would not have given you the option to get off the board or commission. I will say this, that yes, some of you may be sitting here thinking at this point, what have I gotten myself into? And that's pretty common for folks who serve on new boards and commissions, and often boards and commissions like this, Board of Adjustment, Building and Standards, Planning and Zoning. I think what I'd tell you to take from Dan's stuff, it's important you go through the training. If you've not been in the public sector before, you may not be used to the fact that all the things that you do are subject generally to those open records requests. And I will say this, that likely the only thing you'll get from us are emails saying, this is when the meeting's going to be, here's a link to your packet, things like that. So there shouldn't be a whole lot. I will tell you, if you're in doubt about something, potential communications, what's appropriate, a contact for somebody, reach out, as Lisa said, to her or Tiffany. We can certainly bring in the city attorney on something. So again, if in doubt, proceed with caution, bring it to our attention, and we'll help you there. The other thing I'll tell you is you may have been listening to the presentation about staff, about the kind of cases and going, I kind of understand what he's saying, but I don't really, and that's okay too. One of the things that you get before cases that you may hear or items that we bring forward to you in terms of recommendations is staff will prepare a packet, staff will have a lot of information, we'll present that to you at the meeting, and a lot of it will be you guys asking us questions about, explain this, walk me through this, show me where the code says it. So the idea is that we use these meetings to get you comfortable with the topic so that you can serve in the role that you'll have. So again, I think once you kind of do a little bit of this, you'll say, all right, that wasn't as bad as it seemed the first meeting. But again, Lisa will kind of walk you through how you'll get your packet. But again, thanks for serving. I think you'll probably enjoy it. You'll be able to kind of participate in what makes our city the way it is. So with that, again, we appreciate it.
Thank you, Brian. So the last few items that I have written down here based on just listening and going through this and thinking all the things that we've thrown at you is that, as Brian said, we do provide you a very detailed packet. So we provide you a staff report with the staff analysis as well as a recommendation. We provide you all the exhibits that you're going to need, any code references that you're going to need, and we send that to you in advance. So it's not like you're going to get it the day of. We'll send it to you in advance. You'll get an email from us that'll have a copy of the agenda and a link to all the associated documents. At the meetings themselves, we're going to provide you an iPad at your spot, so we'll set those up at each meeting so that you'll be able to look at any exhibits, especially if they're maps. You might be able to might want to zoom in or zoom out while you're here at the meeting. We'll show a presentation as well. When the building code items come up, we'll be holding some stakeholder meetings with the Greater San Antonio Builders Association as well as other builders and contractors as we start working through those code amendments. And then we'll send those out plenty in advance because those are going to be a lot of detailed information for y'all to look at. So we won't just throw it on you the week, oh, you got to spend the whole weekend looking. I will send it out several weeks in advance so that y'all get an opportunity to take a look at those things. Other than that, if y'all have any ideas for the next meeting, feel free to send us emails. If you have any questions now or have anything you'd like to say now, feel free. Otherwise, we can adjourn the meeting if you are ready to adjourn. Can I hear a gavel, Glenn? Yep. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.